Welcome back to the House Doctor. Today I'm going to talk to you about toilets, how they work, and some simple fixes that you can do yourself. To complete today's project, I bought this Fluidmaster all-in-one kit. It contains all the parts that you need to completely rebuild a toilet, make it like it was brand new. I'll have a link in the description below where you can pick one of these up pretty cheap. Before we get started, I'm going to show you what the inside of a toilet looks like. Because it's hard to get a shot of the inside of the toilet, I put together this mock-up to give you an idea of what's going on inside your toilet tank, so you can better troubleshoot problems you may be having with your toilet. So when you take the top off the back of your toilet tank, this is what you're going to see on the inside. Your handle and the arm. This arm may be made out of brass or steel on yours. A chain going down to the flapper. Here's your fill tube. This is your float. If you have an older style toilet, your float is going to be over here. It's going to be a big football shaped thing with a metal arm going across to it. And then this is the tube right here that fills up the toilet bowl. When you flush the toilet, push down the handle, it lifts this arm, which raises the flapper. This allows the water to rush through this hole down into the bowl and to flush the toilet. Once that happens, your float drops down, and this opens the valve, allowing water to fill the tank back up. A small amount of water travels through this tube and goes into the fill tube here, which fills the bowl back up with water. As the water raises up, it'll lift the float, activating the arm here, which will shut the water off, and the water will stop filling up the tank. If the water's running constantly, it could be a couple of problems. First, check and make sure your handle can move freely, there's no tension on your chain, and the flapper valve is down all the way. If your float is up all the way, either this style or the kind with the football on it, then the problem is going to be your valve right here is not closing completely. And the only thing to do in that situation is to replace the valve, which is very simple to do. If your water level is too high, it's going to be dripping over this tube down into the bowl, and it's never going to fill up to the point where it shuts the water off. You can try fixing that by adjusting the float, which on this style, you turn this shaft to raise and lower the float in relation to the shutoff valve, or if you have the kind with the big ball on the side, you twist the ball to run it in and out on the metal rod to adjust the water level. If you have a toilet that shuts off and then maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe an hour later, turns on, filling back up again, and then shuts right back off, the problem is most likely your flapper valve is not sealing completely. You can try and fix that by taking a rag and wiping off the bottom of the flapper valve and the top of this plastic here where it seals. If you have a toilet that's squealing or screaming when it fills up, the problem is your valve right here builds up with calcium and other deposits, and the water starts to make noise as it goes through the valve. The only thing to do in that situation is replace this valve. If you have a leak coming from your tank, there's only a few places that it could be coming from. You have the two screws right here that connect the tank to the toilet bowl. Could be leaking from these rubber washers. It could be leaking from the seal at the bottom of this tube, which is one assembly, or it could be leaking at the rubber seal underneath the fill valve tube. The bottom of your tank is going to look something like this. Here's the two screws that come through the bottom. Note that there are no seals on the bottom of the tank. They're all on the inside. This big plastic nut holds the fill tube and flapper assembly to the tank. There's no seal here. It's again on the inside of the tank. And here's the nut that tightens the fill valve tube to the tank. You'll also have a big rubber donut that looks something like this. It may be a different color. It may be black or gray. This seals the tank to the toilet. The first thing we want to do is shut off the water to the toilet. So now we have the water shut off, we can flush the toilet. Now that the water's shut off, we need to disconnect this connection here, which puts the water supply to the toilet. Should be able to do it by hand without a wrench. And you'll see here the plastic nut that we looked at earlier. This is what connects the fill tube valve to the tank, and this is the supply line. And right underneath here you can see one of the bolts that holds the toilet tank to the bowl. Okay, after we take our tank lid off and flush our toilet a couple of times, there's still going to be some water left in the tank. And what I like to do is just take a rag, sop it up, and squeeze it into the bowl. Unfortunately, I had to hacksaw these bolts that were holding the tank to the toilet. There was no other way of getting them off. They were so corroded I couldn't get a socket on them or hold the head of the screw. It's always a good idea to have a simple little hacksaw like this, a plumber's hacksaw, in case you run into one of these situations. Let's get the tank lifted off. The nut that holds the handle assembly onto the tank is left-hand threads. So that means instead of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, it's lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. So we need to get that off. Now we can disconnect our chain, take the handle out, and pull the rest of the guts out. I have all the parts of the tank removed and wiped the tank out, and I threw everything out except this piece right here, which we're going to need when we put the tank back on. Not the whole thing, but just part of it. I'll explain that to you in a minute. Before I put these pieces together, I'm going to take some Vaseline and I'm going to put it on both sides of these rubber seals. It just helps make everything seal a little bit better, and they slide together a little easier to make sure you get good contact. You also want to make sure you get it on both sides of the washer for the bolts that hold the tank to the toilet bowl. When you put this piece in, this tube should go towards the back of the tank. And we're going to put our plastic nut on and snug it up a little bit. We're not going to tighten it all the way just yet. We're going to kind of wiggle it a little bit to make sure that rubber seal is centered inside the hole that's in the bottom of the tank. Now we're going to put this in, and when this goes in, we want to make sure this hose is pointing towards the center of the tank. So now you'll have some kind of clip like this. Sometimes it's all stainless steel, but either way you want to make sure that the tube and the little piece that where the water is going to come out of is pointing into the center of that hole. So this hose is a little bit long. I'm going to trim this off. And this piece here, your kit may or may not have it. This allows you to adjust the amount of flow that goes in to fill up the toilet bowl. Have everything lined up pretty well where we want it to be. Now I'm going to tighten them up at the bottom. And these are only plastic. They don't have to be really tight, just snugged up. Now we're going to put our bolts in. And then we put a washer on each bolt. I don't know if you can see this, but should have two different size nuts, a thicker one and a thinner one. The thinner ones go on now to hold the bolts inside the tank. The thicker ones will go on the bottom of the bowl to hold the tank to the bowl. You may need to put a screwdriver onto the bolts to hold them from spinning while you tighten them up. This orange piece is the seal that goes between the tank and the bowl, and it goes on like this. It's kind of snug around that pipe, and then it'll compress to the bowl. This black thing that came off the tank is the same seal. You can see how worn out it is. It's very dry and hard. But we need to use the ends of this over again. On some toilets, on the bowl, there's a lip that hits the tank in the front and the back. And what that does is limit how tight the tank is to the bowl. This toilet doesn't have that, so we need to reuse these little ears, and they'll act as spacers to prevent us from tightening the tank down too much. And now you can kind of see how they're going to work. They're going to act as giant washers so that we can only tighten the tank down so much. Now let's put the tank back on the toilet. The next part I'm not going to be able to get a shot of, but I need to put a washer and a nut underneath the bowl on each side and tighten those up. It's a lot easier to tighten these up if you have a deep well socket that you can put on there. Just keep in mind, don't use the handle way out here where you can put a lot of pressure on the bolt. This porcelain does crack on it. Just snug them up until the tank doesn't move. I'm going to reattach that nut for the water line that I took off earlier. I'm not going to lay back down with the camera and get you a shot of it. It was that gray plastic nut that we took off when we first started. That's on. Now all we need to do is put our handle on and connect the chain. And remember, the threads on this are reverse threads, so lefty-tighty. The last thing to do is hook up the chain to the arm, and you want to try and take some of the slack out of it. So you do that by just taking the chain off and moving the hook up or down on the chain to where you want it to be. And you should hook it to the arm so that it's directly above the chain, so when the chain is hanging down, it's hanging down somewhat straight. So I'm going to put it for this toilet right at the very end, and that should be good. Looks like we have good action there. Let me turn the toilet on and check for leaks. All right, you can see down here at the bottom of the fill tube, it's spraying water out of the sides. That's filling up only the tank. And right here, this water that's going in here is going into the toilet bowl. It's all filled up and ready to go. I hope you found this video helpful. I'll have a link in the description down below of all the supplies and tools that I use to complete this job. If you have any toilet questions or any other questions, put them in the comments below. I'll be sure to read them and answer to them. Thanks for watching. I hope you like, share, and subscribe.